At a top-ranked university's awards ceremony, the lights dimmed, and the valedictorian stepped up, only to be skipped. The crowd clapped as the runner-up, a white student, took the stage. Security moved in to escort 17-year-old Jamal off quietly. No one explained why. He had the highest GPA, the most credits. But the dean whispered, "It's complicated. What Jamal does next stuns the entire school and shatters the illusion of merit." Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The hallway of Hamilton Preparatory High School smelled like floor polish and money. Polished mahogany lockers gleamed under fluorescent lights. The school's trophy cases stretched like museums of success. State championships, Ivy League banners, and gold-plated names engraved on plaques that no one outside this zip code had ever heard of. Students glided through the hallways in designer sneakers, Apple Watches glowing with text alerts. Conversations about ski trips and internships hummed in the air like a language of its own. And into that world stepped Khalil Harris, 16 years old, slim, frame. A boy whose entire presence seemed to whisper rather than announce. His sneakers were scuffed. His shirt was neatly ironed, but frayed at the cuffs. His backpack, a faded blue hand-me-down, sagged against his shoulders. His brown skin in this sea of pale faces made him both invisible and glaringly visible at once. He walked carefully, counting the room numbers under his breath, as if they were coordinates in a hostile landscape. Counted 99, 300, 301. Finally, he stopped at room 302, the advanced calculus classroom. His mother's voice echoed in his head. "Keep your head down, baby. Learn what you came to learn. Don't give them a reason." The door was already open. Inside, 30 students, most of them juniors and seniors with last names recognizable in the local newspaper, sat clustered in sleek rows. Their laptops were open, glowing Apple logos like identical white eyes. The teacher stood at the front, chalk in hand. Dr. Walter Granger, a tall man with silvering hair and the posture of someone who never questioned his own authority. His tweed jacket hung perfectly. His tie matched the school's navy and gold colors. He was mid-sentence, scrawling symbols across the board in wide, confident strokes. He paused only when the door creaked, and a new shadow crossed the threshold. Khalil froze for half a second before stepping in. "Excuse me," he said quietly, voice nearly swallowed by the room. Dr. Granger's chalk stopped. His eyes flicked up. The entire room seemed to inhale at once. Conversation ceased. Even the sound of someone's Spotify leaking faintly from earbuds cut off. All 30 pairs of eyes swiveled toward the doorway. "You must be Harris," Dr. Granger said, not as a question but as a diagnosis. His gaze swept over Khalil like a scanner, cataloging the thrift store shirt, the dark skin, the nervous grip on the backpack strap. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, suspicion, maybe annoyance, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "Yes, sir," Khalil murmured. Dr. Granger gestured vaguely toward the back. "Find a seat. We've already started." Khalil stepped carefully between the rows, feeling every whisper slice at him like paper cuts. A boy in a Yale hoodie smirked. Two girls with perfect ponytails exchanged glances that weren't exactly hostile but weren't kind either. A low murmur rose. "Who's that? Is he in the wrong class? They let him in?" Khalil's face remained blank, but inside, his stomach clenched. He slid into an empty desk at the back, nearest a window. The glass reflected his face faintly. Brown skin, dark eyes, expression neutral like a mask. Outside, a flag fluttered at half-mast for some unknown tragedy. But inside this room, it was as if the flag was for him. At the front, Dr. Granger resumed writing on the board. But his movements were slower now, less automatic. The room had shifted. He could feel it. A newcomer, a disruption in a pattern he'd long cultivated. Khalil opened his notebook. It was thick with notes from the summer derivatives. Integrals, limits, problems he'd taught himself on late nights after his shift at the grocery store. He didn't look up as Dr. Granger spoke, but he heard the tone shift, a cool edge creeping in. "This," Dr. Granger said, pointing to the chalkboard, "is the concept we're building toward. A problem none of you have seen yet." He turned back to the class, scanning faces. His gaze landed, inevitably, on Khalil. "You there?" Khalil's head lifted slightly. "Yes, sir." Dr. Granger tilted his chin. "You're new. Harris, correct? Advanced calculus isn't a remedial class. We cover material that frankly most students find challenging even after 2 years of preparation, but perhaps you already know that. His smile was thin, brittle. A ripple of quiet laughter traveled across the room. Someone coughed. Khalil felt heat rise to his neck but kept his voice steady. Yes, sir, I'm aware. Good, Dr. Granger said. Because I hate to waste time. We were about to review a concept I introduced last week. You seem eager. Care to explain it? Khalil blinked. I wasn't here last week. Dr. Granger said, as if he'd proven a point. Well, perhaps you'll try anyway. Stand up if you don't mind. Show us what you know. The room tensed. This wasn't how Dr. Granger usually ran class. Even the Yale hoodie boy frowned slightly, sensing the imbalance. Khalil stood slowly, his chair scraping softly against the floor. He clutched his notebook to his chest for a moment, before setting it down. The chalkboard stretched before him like a courtroom. He hadn't even unpacked his pencil yet. At the front, Dr. Granger picked up a piece of chalk, twirled it between his fingers, then held it out. Here, he said. Let's see. Khalil walked to the front. His footsteps felt too loud in the silence. He took the chalk, fingers brushing against Dr. Granger's for a fraction of a second. It was cold, dusty. On the board, Dr. Granger had written, Lumx 0 sun, 5xx, Lumx to 0, 5xx. It was a basic problem, but the way he'd written it suggested something trickier might follow. Evaluate, Dr. Granger said simply. Khalil hesitated. He could feel 30 pairs of eyes burning holes in his back. The whispers in the hallway came back. Don't give them a reason. His throat was dry. Then something shifted inside him. The endless nights at the library. The way he'd taught himself limits by candlelight, when the power had been shut off. The quiet pride in knowing things no one thought he could know. All of it rose like a tide. He turned to the board and began to write. His handwriting was steady, precise. Limx 0 sin, 5xx, Limx x, Limx xx, Limx xx, Limx xx, Limx xx, Limx xx, Limx xx, Limx xxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxxx́ The room had frozen. Even the humming of the overhead lights seemed to pause. Khalil stepped back, hands clasped loosely in front of him. He didn't look at Dr. Granger. He didn't look at the students. He looked at the floor, breathing evenly. Then someone whispered, barely audible. He got it right. Another voice. Wait. What? Dr. Granger's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. He stared at the board as though it had betrayed him. Then, without a word, he reached for the eraser and swept Khalil's work away in 3 quick swipes. Lucky guess, he said curtly. Sit down. Khalil hesitated, then returned to his seat. His heartbeat was a drum in his ears. The chalk dust still clung to his fingertips. Behind him, the whispers swelled. Not admiration but confusion, skepticism. The Yale hoodie boy leaned to his neighbor and muttered, he probably cheated somehow. Khalil sat down, opened his notebook, and wrote nothing. At the front, Dr. Granger turned back to the class, his smile a thin veneer now. As I was saying, he began, voice tight, this is a challenging course. Some of you may find yourselves out of your depth. His eyes flicked, just for a second, to Khalil. Khalil kept his gaze on the paper, but his hands trembled slightly. He had done nothing wrong, yet the air felt heavier, denser. Around him, students exchanged looks, not supportive, not hostile but calculating. Outside the window, the flag still fluttered at half-mast. The bell for the next period was still 20 minutes away. Dr. Granger moved on to the next concept, but his tone had changed. He spoke faster, sharper, as if trying to reassert control. He asked questions only to his favorite students now. Khalil's presence had unsettled something he couldn't name but deeply felt. At the back, Khalil's mind drifted to his mother, working her double shift at the hospital, to the notebooks piled under his bed, to the janitor who sometimes nodded at him in the hall. He told himself, keep your head down, you're here to learn. But he could feel it. The teacher's gaze on him like a weight, the murmurs in the corners of the room, the subtle shifts of posture from the other students. Something was building, a storm under the fluorescent lights. Dr. Granger paused mid-sentence. His chalk hovered above the board. Slowly, he turned, scanning the class. His eyes landed once again on Khalil, who was scribbling quietly in his notebook. In that moment, Dr. Granger made a decision. He wouldn't let this boy, this quiet outsider, make him look like a fool again. His next move would not be an accident. As Khalil sits in the back, Dr. Granger locks eyes with him and decides to test him, right there in front of everyone. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed above room 302, like a low, persistent accusation. It had been 10 silent minutes since Khalil solved the first problem. 10 minutes where Dr. Granger lectured with a brittle smile, chalk snapping in his grip as if the sticks themselves couldn't withstand his restraint. Khalil kept his head bowed, filling his notebook with equations he already knew by heart, trying to be small again. But small was no longer possible. The students had seen him solve what they couldn't. They had seen the professor erase it. And though no one said it outright, the tension was an organism now, alive in the room, feeding on every glance and whisper. Dr. Granger turned from the board. "All right," he said, his voice carrying that casual venom teachers use when they want to seem fair but aren't. "Let's review something a little advanced." Khalil's pencil paused mid-scribble. "We've been working on basic limit functions, but there's another concept some of you might have glimpsed if you're especially motivated." The professor's gaze flicked toward the back row. "Improper integrals." Half the class blinked. The words might as well have been a foreign language. Dr. Granger smiled faintly. "Mr. Harris, since you're so eager to demonstrate your talents, why don't you show us how to evaluate this?" He turned back to the board, scrawling an expression so wide it barely fit.
Inzeron X, Inzeron X, Inzeron X.
He underlined it twice. "A simple exercise," he said, the word simple like a blade. A murmur spread across the rows. "We haven't learned that," someone whispered. "Is that even on the syllabus?" Another voice. "He's gonna bomb this." Khalil's heartbeat thudded in his ears. Improper integrals. He'd only practiced them in library sessions, in the hour after his grocery shift before the lights flicked off. But he did know them. Not perfectly, but enough. He looked up slowly. "Sir," he said, his voice even but quiet, "we haven't covered." "That's true," Dr. Granger cut in, smile widening. "We haven't, but sometimes real talent transcends the lesson plan." He spread his hands toward the board. "Show us." All eyes swung to the back of the room. Khalil could feel them like heat on his skin, some eager to see him fall, some just curious. A few maybe sympathetic but too afraid to show it. He thought of his mother's words that morning. "Be careful, baby. Some people will test you just to watch you break." For a moment he considered saying no. He could have refused politely, claimed ignorance, sat still until the teacher moved on. But deep inside, beneath the quiet, something stubborn stirred. He hadn't clawed his way into this classroom to shrink on command. Khalil closed his notebook. "All right," he said softly. A ripple of surprise moved through the class. He stood. His chair made a faint scraping sound, like a blade drawn from a sheath. He walked down the narrow aisle between the rows. His shoes were scuffed, but his steps were steady. Dr. Granger held out the chalk with exaggerated politeness. "The floor is yours," he said. Khalil took the chalk. It felt like a pebble in his hand, light, brittle, easy to crush. He turned to the board, staring at the integral. For a heartbeat the room dissolved, and he was back in the library, sitting under the hum of an old ceiling fan, his fingers tracing formulas on crumpled printouts. A cracked phone propped against a pile of free textbooks. He remembered how he'd solved similar problems there, whispering the steps under his breath like prayers. Behind him someone muttered, "He's dead." Another whispered, "Bet he Googled it last time." Dr. Granger leaned on his desk, arms crossed, a slight smirk pulling at his mouth. Khalil's shoulders squared. He picked up the eraser and cleared a small space under the problem. He drew a line, began writing, not the answer, but the method. His handwriting, as always, was neat, precise, almost elegant. First he rewrote the integral. I0nix621, 2dx I sicum, mayon bitterfesti, for years. Then below it, let ex. The class watched, confused. The Yale hoodie boy snorted. "He's doing substitutions like we're in Calc I," he muttered. But Khalil kept going, silent, absorbed. He wrote the derivative, rewrote the limits of integration, transformed the integral step by step. And as he worked, something shifted. The mocking whispers dulled. The smirk on Dr. Granger's face faltered by a fraction. Because the steps weren't random. They were clean, deliberate, like a musician playing a piece by memory. Khalil's inner monologue was steady now, almost calm. If you x carousel 1, then do a 2, x dx. Adjust the constants. He solved for dx. Replaced the variables. Simplified the fraction. Slowly, the monstrous integral shrank to something manageable. 12 on 1 to 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 1. And from there, 12 u1. 1 sin, for f1 2. Let's plano it say. He wrote the evaluation cleanly. 12. 1. 1. And finally, where to give the 1. He set the chalk down. A hush fell over the room. Not the hush of confusion, but the hush of impact. Khalil stepped back, his palms slightly damp. Someone whispered, awed despite themselves. He actually did it. Dr. Granger's smirk had vanished entirely now. His lips parted just enough to reveal clenched teeth. He stared at the board for a long second. Then, with a voice carefully stripped of warmth, he said, sit down. Khalil blinked. No acknowledgement. No correct. No impressive. Just sit down. He returned to his seat, every step heavier than the last. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up his notebook. Around him, the whispers started again. How? Did he cheat? This is insane. He's making Granger mad. At the front, Dr. Granger picked up the eraser and wiped away the work in 3 angry strokes. Chalk dust billowed like smoke. We'll move on, he said tightly. Some of you may think you're ahead, but this is a college-level course. Showmanship doesn't replace understanding. Khalil's jaw tightened. He wrote nothing in his notebook. But inside, something dark and bitter grew. He had done exactly what was asked, and still the professor had erased him. Dr. Granger began a new problem, speaking quickly, but his rhythm was off now. He kept glancing at Khalil, as though recalibrating some invisible plan. Near the window, Khalil stared at his blank page. He thought of his late nights in the library, his cracked phone streaming lectures at 2 a.m., his hands aching from bagging groceries. After school, he thought of how none of that mattered here. Not the work, not the knowledge, not the proof. And then something flickered across his mind like a small flame. A memory. A man in a dark uniform, years ago, telling his mother at a parent-teacher meeting, maybe this school just isn't the right fit for your son. He remembered her clenched fists, her polite smile, her whispered, we'll see. Now here he was again, at a different desk, under different fluorescent lights, hearing the same subtext, you don't belong here. Dr. Granger put the chalk down. He folded his hands, leaned on the desk, and looked straight at Khalil. Mr. Harris, he said, voice smooth but loaded. I see you enjoy making an impression. Perhaps we should give you something special. The class shifted. This was no longer a lesson. This was a spectacle. Khalil lifted his gaze slowly. His face was neutral, but his heart hammered. Another problem? He asked softly. Dr. Granger smiled thinly. Not exactly. He turned back to the board and began writing something so sprawling, so advanced, that even the best students gasped. Symbols from calculus, mixed with trigonometric identities, and obscure constants. It wasn't on any syllabus. It looked more like a puzzle than a problem. There, Dr. Granger said, stepping aside. Let's see if you can solve that. Or was the last one just luck? The room buzzed now, the sound like a hive about to break. Khalil stared at the board. His pulse quickened. This wasn't just a test. It was a trap. For a moment he wanted to refuse. He wanted to melt into the back row and disappear. But then he remembered something else from those library nights. How it felt to solve a problem everyone else had given up on. He stood slowly, the scrape of his chair like thunder in the quiet. He walked toward the board again, the students' whispers trailing behind him like smoke. And as he reached for the chalk, a thought came unbidden, dark, electric, and unstoppable. What if I don't just solve it? What if I show them something they can't erase? He took the chalk. The room held its breath. Khalil slowly stands, picks up the chalk, and starts writing something no one expects. The chalk in Khalil's hand trembled only slightly as he stared at the sprawling, impossible problem Dr. Granger had written on the board. It wasn't just one equation. It was a labyrinth of symbols and nested expressions, like a coded message, only meant to humiliate whoever dared to touch it. Integrals within limits, trigonometric inverses tucked inside partial fractions, even an unfamiliar Greek letter scrawled in the middle as if to taunt him. For a heartbeat, Khalil stood motionless, chalk hovering just above the first line. 30 pairs of eyes bore into his back. some with open curiosity, some with concealed malice. A few, just a few, with quiet hope he wouldn't crumble. He exhaled. In his mind, he heard the scratch of pencil on library paper, the mechanical voice of an online lecture whispering formulas at 1 a.m., the way the janitor had nodded at him last week when he stayed late to finish a problem no one else wanted to touch. Khalil stepped closer to the board. With his free hand, he brushed aside a bit of chalk dust, making a clean space to work. And then, like a pianist finding the first key of a melody, he began. First, he rewrote the expression, his letters tall and deliberate. Then he broke it apart, not solving yet, but analyzing. His mind ran through the possibilities. Substitution, integration by parts, series expansion. The more he looked, the more a pattern emerged. Hidden, but there. He started with a substitution the class hadn't seen yet. A trick he'd picked up online from a college lecture, far beyond high school level. He rewrote the limits, shifted the constants, inverted a fraction. Slowly, the chaotic sprawl of symbols began to condense under his hand, like a knot untangling. Behind him, whispers started. Wait, he's actually doing something. What's he writing? We didn't learn that. Dr. Granger's smirk faltered, though he kept his arms crossed. Khalil's chalk scratched steadily. He filled the left side of the board with intermediate steps, arrows leading to simplified forms. He paused once, glancing at the Greek letter in the middle, and with a tiny nod to himself, wrote its equivalent constant in terms of. By now the board looked like a map of a country only he knew how to navigate. Minutes passed. The whispers died. Even the Yale hoodie boy leaned forward, frowning, not mocking now, but fascinated. Khalil's heart was pounding, but his mind was sharp, clearer than it had ever been in this room. Every stroke of chalk was a small act of defiance. You can't erase what I know. Finally, after a series of transformations, he arrived at a clean, elegant expression, a definite integral with straightforward limits. He solved it step by step, his handwriting still neat, not hurried. At last, under a line he'd drawn across the board, he wrote the answer. A simple fraction. He put the chalk down gently, the click against the tray echoing like a gunshot. Silence. It stretched across the room, heavy and absolute. Khalil turned slightly, not smiling, not gloating, just breathing. His palms were damp, but his eyes were steady. For a moment, no one moved. Then a girl near the front whispered, "He did it."
Another voice. No way.
Someone else. "That's the right answer. I saw that problem online once." All around him, jaws dropped. Even the ones who doubted him couldn't hide it now. Khalil didn't expect applause, but he had hoped maybe for acknowledgement. A nod. A well done, even grudging respect. Something. Instead, Dr. Granger moved forward, face unreadable. He picked up the eraser, and before Khalil could step back, before anyone could say a word, he began wiping away the board. In 3 harsh sweeps, the hours of study, the late nights, the quiet brilliance, erased. Chalk dust floated in the air, like smoke after a fire. "Lucky guess," Dr. Granger muttered. The words landed like stones. Khalil blinked. For a second he thought he'd misheard, but the professor had already turned his back, picking up a fresh piece of chalk as if nothing had happened. "Lucky guess." A soft laugh from somewhere in the room. A whisper. "Figures." Another. He couldn't really know all that. Khalil stood frozen for a moment, staring at the blank board. The eraser had left faint ghost marks of his work, but even those were fading. "Sit down," Dr. Granger said over his shoulder. Voice clipped. "We're moving on." Khalil walked back to his seat slowly, like someone leaving a crime scene. His legs felt heavy, his hands still covered in chalk dust. He sat down, opened his notebook, and stared at the blank page. No one clapped. No one defended him. Around him, the whispers had changed tone. Not amusement now, but something more insidious. Cheated. Set up. No way he knew that. The Yale hoodie boy leaned over to his friend, muttering just loud enough for Khalil to hear. "Bet he memorized some solutions from the internet." Khalil's jaw tightened, but he didn't look up. Inside, a swirl of emotions rose. Anger, humiliation, exhaustion, a thin thread of pride that refused to die. He had solved it. He had done what none of them could. But here, in this room, truth didn't matter. At the front, Dr. Granger launched into a new topic, speaking faster than usual, like someone trying to erase not just chalk but memory. He didn't look at Khalil again. Outside the window, Sunlight glared off the polished cars in the student parking lot. Inside, Khalil wrote nothing. His pencil hovered above the page, unmoving. He thought of his mother's tired eyes. He thought of the janitor's quiet warning glance last week. He thought of all the times people had told him he didn't belong, not outright, but in 1,000 small, silent ways. Something inside him hardened. When the bell finally rang, it was like a release valve. Students gathered their things quickly, murmuring about lunch plans, tests, gossip. No one spoke to him. No one even made eye contact. Khalil packed his notebook carefully, brushing chalk dust from his fingers onto his jeans. He stood, slinging his faded backpack over his shoulder. As he walked toward the door, he felt Dr. Granger's gaze follow him. Not neutral, but assessing, measuring. Khalil stepped into the hallway, the noise of the school crashing back around him. He kept his head down, walking fast, though he had nowhere to go. He didn't see Dr. Granger slip into his office minutes later, shutting the door behind him. Inside, the professor sat at his desk, typing an email quickly, his jaw tight. The subject line read, "Urgent academic integrity concern." He attached a file, a screenshot of Khalil's registration information, notes about his performance today, and a claim that he had used unauthorized materials to obtain answers. His finger hovered for a moment over the send button. He exhaled, pressed it. In the hallway, Khalil paused at the water fountain, splashing cool water on his face. He stared at his reflection in the metal basin, dark eyes, chalk smudges still on his skin. He didn't know it yet, but a new storm had already begun. At that moment, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "How's your day going?" He typed back, "Fine." Then erased it. Typed, "I'll tell you later." Sent that instead. Behind him, the janitor, Mr. Alton, pushed a mop bucket down the hall. He gave Khalil a small knowing nod. Khalil nodded back. He didn't know why, but something in that small gesture steadied him. He walked on, unaware that a copy of Dr. Granger's email had just landed in the principal's inbox. Flagged urgent. Later that day, during his last period, the loudspeaker crackled. "Khalil Harris, please report to the main office immediately." Heads turned. Whispered speculation followed him as he packed his things. He walked out slowly, heart thudding. Later that day, Dr. Granger reports Khalil to the principal for academic dishonesty. Khalil's footsteps echoed down the hallway like a guilty rhythm. He could feel every stare, even the ones behind closed doors. He didn't walk fast. He didn't walk slow, just steady, but inside his chest burned with a quiet fear he couldn't name. Not because he didn't know what was coming, but because he knew exactly what was. The secretary at the front desk didn't smile when he arrived. She didn't ask if he was okay or if he knew why he was there. She just nodded toward the side office and said flatly, "Have a seat. Mr. Brenner will be with you in a moment." Khalil sat. The chair creaked under him, too small for his frame, like a seat made for someone younger, someone not meant to question. The walls were beige, lined with plaques about integrity and character. A fake plant sagged in one corner. Across from him, a closed door with a frosted glass panel read, "Principal R. Brenner." Minutes passed. The ticking clock on the wall felt like it was mocking him. Khalil looked down at his hands. Chalk still rimmed his nails. He rubbed them on his jeans, trying to clean the evidence of excellence. Then the door opened. Principal Ronald Brenner was in his early 50s, bald, with a permanent expression of mild concern that never quite reached empathy. His suit was sharp, his voice smoother than it should have been. "Khalil," he said, gesturing. "Come in." Khalil stood and entered. The office was neatly arranged. Too neatly. Framed diplomas on the wall. A photo of Brenner with state senators. A small bronze eagle perched on the corner of the desk. And sitting off to the side, flipping through a thin folder, was Dr. Granger. Khalil's stomach dropped. Principal Brenner motioned for him to sit across the desk. Khalil obeyed, eyes moving between the two men. No one said anything at first. Then Granger spoke, his voice calm, almost bored. "We're here because a concerning academic irregularity has been brought to my attention." Khalil's brows furrowed. "What irregularity?" Brenner interjected with a rehearsed tone. "Dr. Granger believes you may have accessed unauthorized resources to complete your in-class assignments." "There weren't any assignments," Khalil said. "He asked me to solve problems on the board. I didn't use anything." Granger didn't even look at him. "And yet, you solved a college-level problem that none of my senior students could. Flawlessly." in front of 30 witnesses. I studied it, with no prior instruction? Granger folded his arms. You expect us to believe that? Brenner leaned forward slightly, adopting a tone of mock understanding. Khalil, this isn't an attack. But your performance today, both in terms of what you solved and how you did it, raises questions. It's not just about ability. It's about procedure, integrity. Khalil's voice was steady, but low. If I was white, would we be having this conversation? The question hung in the air like a slap. Brenner blinked. Granger scoffed. I beg your pardon, the principal said. You didn't ask for proof, Khalil continued, his throat tightening. You didn't ask me how I solved it. You just assumed I cheated. No investigation. Just his word. We don't need a formal investigation to follow our instincts, Granger said coldly. You came into this class 2 weeks late, skipped the prerequisite, and suddenly you are solving problems we haven't taught. Forgive me if that sounds suspicious. Khalil stared at him. I didn't skip anything. I tested into the class. You saw my placement. Placement scores can be manipulated, Granger replied. Khalil's jaw clenched. By who? I don't even have a working printer at home. Brenner raised a hand. Let's not get emotional. That phrase broke something in Khalil. I'm not emotional, he said, voice sharper now. I'm tired. I worked to be here. I studied all summer, and because I'm not who you expect to be good at this, I must be lying. There was a pause. Not silence. Just the cold kind of quiet that says nothing good is coming next. Brenner looked at the folder in front of him, then back at Khalil. Given the circumstances, and in the interest of maintaining academic integrity, we're placing you on temporary probation. What does that mean? Khalil asked. It means, Granger said smoothly, you'll still attend class, but your work will be subject to review. All of it. Past and present. You'll take separate assessments. And if anything is flagged, disciplinary action will follow. I didn't cheat, Khalil said again, firmer this time. That's not the point, Granger replied. Khalil's face twisted. Then what is? Before either man could answer, a sharp knock hit the door. Brenner frowned and opened it. A woman stepped in mid-30s, tired eyes, blue scrubs under a fleece jacket. Tanya Harris, Khalil's mother. She walked in like someone already angry, already exhausted, already prepared to fight. Her badge was still clipped to her pocket. Her sneakers were still damp from the hospital's disinfectant floors. She looked at her son, then at the men. Someone want to explain to me why I got a call saying my child's under academic review for cheating. Brenner stood halfway. Ms. Harris, I was just about to. No, she snapped. I don't want polished. I want honest. What did he do exactly? Granger stood too, adjusting his sleeves. Your son performed suspiciously well in a public demonstration. That's not a crime, she said flatly. It suggests a pattern, he replied, of inconsistencies. We're simply being cautious. Tanya narrowed her eyes. You didn't call me when he got an A in English, or when he helped another student with TREG, but now he solves a hard problem in your class, and suddenly you were flagging him as dishonest. Miss Harris, Brenner said calmly, we just want to ensure everything is legitimate. Tanya crossed her arms. And I want to ensure everything isn't racist. A long pause. Then she turned to Khalil. Baby, did you cheat? Khalil's voice cracked, just slightly. No, Mama. Then you hold your head up. Let them check whatever they want. She turned back to the men. But if you put one strike on his record, you better have receipts, because I'll bring lawyers. I'll bring the press. I'll bring the NAACP. And trust me, this school loves its image more than its students. Brenner stiffened. Granger's face darkened, but he said nothing. Tanya looked at her son again. Get your things. Khalil stood. As they walked toward the door, Granger spoke, his tone almost amused now. Just know if he stumbles, even once, we'll be watching. Tanya didn't even turn around. You already were. That's the problem.
They walked out. The hallway was quieter now, mostly empty. Tanya stopped just outside the office, pressed her fingers to her temples.
You okay? She asked. Khalil nodded, but it wasn't honest. She looked at him, really looked. I'll fight for you, Khalil. Always. But you've got to decide if you're gonna stay quiet or make them uncomfortable. I don't want to just make them uncomfortable, he said quietly. I want to beat them, with their own rules. She smiled, proud but tired. Then let's start tonight. They began walking toward the exit, the late afternoon sun stretching shadows across the floor. But just before they reached the stairwell, a low voice called out. "Hey!" Khalil turned. It was Mr. Alton, the janitor. Older, black, wiry gray hair under a school cap. He held a mop, but wasn't moving. His eyes were fixed on Khalil. "I heard what they did," Alton said. Khalil glanced at his mother, then back. "Yeah. Doesn't surprise me." Mr. Alton stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That teacher's done this before. Quiet. Under the radar. Pushes out kids that don't fit. Most of them didn't fight back." Khalil's eyes narrowed. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Alton said, glancing over his shoulder, "there's a file room downstairs. Records going back years. Things that don't get deleted. Things they hoped people wouldn't notice." He looked Khalil dead in the eyes. "You want proof? That's where you'll find it." Khalil is put on academic probation, but a janitor who overheard everything approaches him with a secret. The hallway near the east stairwell was dim, its lights flickering with an eerie buzz. Most students never came this far. Too close to the boiler rooms. Too far from the Wi-Fi. Khalil followed Mr. Alton in silence, the mop bucket wheels squeaking behind them like a warning. His mother had gone back to the hospital, after making him promise he'd call if anything changed. She didn't know he'd stayed behind. "You sure we're not gonna get caught?" Khalil asked, his voice hushed. Mr. Alton didn't answer immediately. He walked like a man who'd traveled this path too many times to fear it anymore. "They won't come down here," he said, eventually. "Not unless the copier breaks or the vending machine jams. You ever see Granger near a mop?" "Exactly." They turned a corner, past a metal door marked Stowage 2B. Mr. Alton pulled a ring of old keys from his belt, flipped through them like a ritual, then slid one into the lock. Khalil stepped inside and stopped. The room was colder than the hall. Dust floated through the shaft of light spilling from a cracked bulb. Rusted filing cabinets lined the walls, their drawers labeled in fading ink. Academic placement, Math Team 2004-2012. Faculty correspondence. A spider skittered across the floor. The silence was thick. Mr. Alton closed the door behind them. "This here," he said, "is where the forgotten stuff ends up. But forgotten don't mean worthless." He walked to a cabinet in the back and yanked it open. Papers rustled. Folders shifted. Khalil stood frozen, his chest tight with something between hope and dread. "Start looking," Mr. Alton said. "You're not the first one he tried to erase." Khalil stepped forward, reached for a folder marked Math Team 2017-2018, and flipped it open. Inside were photos of past team members. Smiling, white, uniformed in matching polos. Taped behind one photo was a withdrawal form. Student, Julian Reyes. Reason, transferred. Julian Reyes. Khalil's brow furrowed. The name rang a bell. He'd heard it whispered once by a substitute teacher who'd called him the first real competition this school's had since Reyes. He opened the next folder. Another withdrawal form. Student, Malcolm Burns. Reason, behavioral incompatibility with academic environment. The code was transparent. Khalil kept reading, flipping through pages of students who never made it past Granger's gatekeeping. Each one, every name that wasn't white, had a file with notes scribbled in red pen. Disruptive. Struggled with advanced materials. Failed to adapt to team rigor. Mr. Alton pointed to one note in particular. "Look at that. Needs further observation. May not reflect true aptitude." Know what that means? It means he didn't like how smart that boy was. Khalil's eyes burned. "How long's this been happening?" Mr. Alton leaned against the wall, folding his arms. "Years. But it's quiet. He never gets loud. Just closes doors slowly." Khalil picked up another folder, heavier than the rest. Inside was a laminated pamphlet. The Whitford Regional Mathematics Championship sponsored by Knight Carter University. Beneath that, a typed roster of Hamilton Prep's participants, all coached by faculty-sponsored Dr. Walter Granger. The same name appeared every year. Different students, same skin color. Khalil flipped to the back. "Scholarships," he read aloud. "Top 3 regional scorers receive guaranteed interviews and early application consideration to Knight Carter's School of Engineering." "That's the game," Alton said. "He picks who gets seen, who gets sent, who's qualified. He doesn't tell the school about the open registration, keeps it in the math team, keeps the math team white." Khalil stared at the page, his heart pounding. "This is real?" Alton nodded. "And you ain't supposed to know about it." But you do now. Khalil sat down on a crate, the folder still in his hands. His brain was racing, not with formulas, but facts. Dr. Granger wasn't just trying to get him out of class. He was trying to block him from every door that came after. How do I get in? Khalil asked suddenly. Alton blinked. Get in? To that competition, he said. If it's open registration, where's the form? Alton gave him a long look. The kind of look that measures more than courage. It measured readiness. Then, wordlessly, he walked to the far cabinet, dug through a stack of supply orders, and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside was a printed form. Blank. Khalil took it like it was gold. He submits it for the team, Alton said. That way nobody registers without his say-so. I'll submit it myself, Khalil said. Individually. You sure? Khalil's eyes were steady. He wants me erased? I'm gonna go where he doesn't want me seen. Alton chuckled. You got more fire in you than the last 3 combined. Khalil grabbed a pen from his backpack and filled out the form, writing carefully in every blank space. Name, grade, email, math course level, parent contact. Then he paused at the final line. Faculty endorsement. He looked up. It needs a signature. Alton scratched his beard. Not if you submit it through the student portal. That section's optional, if you register as an independent. Khalil nodded. Then that's what I'll do. He folded the form, slid it into his binder. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Not because of weight, but because of what it meant. Rebellion. Risk revenge. I'll scan it at the library, he said. Submit it tonight. Alton smiled, almost sadly. You know he's gonna come harder now, right? I know, Khalil said, but now I know where he's hiding. He stood, folder still in hand. You ever thought of telling someone? Tried once, Alton said. Got transferred to basement duty. They don't listen to people who mop. Khalil nodded, understanding. Then let's give them something they can't ignore. As they left the file room, Alton locked the door behind them and handed Khalil a small laminated card. What's this? Khalil asked. A building map, with codes. You'll need it to find the library scanner after hours. You keep maps on you? I keep weapons, Alton said with a grin. They parted near the stairwell. As Khalil climbed back up toward the front of the building, his mind was on fire. Every question he ever had about why there were so few black kids on honor rolls, so few faces like his in the science wing, so few names in the newsletters. It was all here. Quiet barriers, silent sabotage. He didn't just want to compete now. He wanted to win. He wanted to make sure his name couldn't be buried in a drawer marked incompatibility. That night, under the dull glow of the public library's flickering computer lab, Khalil scanned his form and uploaded it to the championship site. The confirmation email came 2 minutes later. Subject Regional Math Championship registration confirmed. He stared at the screen. A small line in the corner read, submitted independently. No faculty sponsor listed. He smiled. He walked home past rows of houses where porch lights glowed over manicured lawns. He walked past schools that never asked for students like him, and churches that handed out food with one hand and doubt with the other. He walked like a boy who had finally seen behind the curtain. He didn't know when, or how, Dr. Granger would find out. But he knew one thing. It was already too late. Khalil decides to enter, behind Dr. Granger's back. The glow from the old desk lamp cast long shadows across Khalil's bedroom wall, tracing the outlines of notebooks, torn practice sheets, and sticky notes scrawled with integration rules and theorem names. The air was thick with the smell of pencil shavings and old textbooks. Outside, the neighborhood was asleep. A distant siren hummed through the night air like a reminder. This world would keep spinning whether he made it or not. But Khalil wasn't sleeping. It was nearly 2:30 a.m., and he'd just begun his second mock test of the night. Timed, handwritten, no calculators, no distractions. The only sound was the scratch of his pencil moving rapidly across paper, and the quiet hum of his cracked laptop running a lecture from a college professor who didn't know his name. He sat hunched in a hand-me-down chair, legs shaking slightly from hours of stillness. The regional competition was now 6 days away. 6 days to master the kind of math Granger said was beyond him. 6 days to prove a point no one else seemed willing to say out loud. You can't erase talent just because it doesn't look like you expect it to. His hands were stiff from writing. His back ached. But quitting wasn't a word he had room for. Not now. Not when the system had already made it clear what it expected of him. Failure in silence. From down the hall, a door creaked open. He barely heard it over the math in his head. Partial fractions, convergent series, bounded limits. Then, Khalil? He froze, turned toward the door. His mother stood there, half lit in the hallway glow, wearing her scrubs from the night shift, her face pale with exhaustion and worry. She had her house shoes on, and a scarf wrapped tight over her braids. It's almost 3 in the morning, Tanya said softly. Khalil blinked. I know, I'm almost done. She walked in slowly, glancing over the sea of formulas covering his desk. What are you doing, baby? He hesitated. He hadn't told her. Not the full truth. Just that he had some extra studying. He didn't want to worry her more than she already was. I'm preparing, he said carefully. She crossed her arms, tilting her head the way she always did when she knew something was being held back. For what? He paused, then exhaled. There's this regional math competition. Granger coaches it every year, but I registered on my own. Independent. Tanya's brows lifted. Without telling him? He wouldn't have let me in, Khalil said. I saw the files. He's been filtering kids like me out for years. She sank slowly onto the edge of his bed. And you want to walk into that man's competition? Alone? I don't want to, Khalil said. I need to. His voice trembled for a moment, then steadied. If I win, it's not just about beating the problem. It's about forcing them to see me, even if it's the last thing they want. Tanya looked at her son, really looked. This boy with chalk, still embedded under his fingernails. This boy who barely ate dinner because he was buried in graphs. This boy who carried books like they were armor. He had his father's eyes, deep focused, tired beyond his years. I get it, she said softly. I do. But Khalil, some doors weren't built for us. They weren't built to open. No matter how smart, no matter how hard you knock. He looked up at her. Then I'll break it down. Her face twisted, equal parts pride and pain. And when they call it vandalism instead of genius, I'll write the proof on the broken pieces. She smiled, a cracked smile. You sound just like your daddy. He smiled too, only slightly. He'd want me to try. They sat in silence for a moment, the glow from the desk lamp painting both of them in soft amber. You need sleep, she finally said. A tired genius can still fail. Khalil nodded, setting down his pencil. He looked at his work, 20 pages of scrawled solutions, mistakes, corrections, the architecture of his rebellion. I'll stop soon, he said. I promise. Tanya stood, kissed the top of his head, then walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned and said, win or lose, you already did what most grown men never try. You stood up. And then she was gone. Khalil sat still for a long moment. Her words echoed louder than any applause he'd never gotten. He turned back to the page. He had one problem left. One more equation between him and a few hours of sleep. He picked up his pencil. The days passed in fragments. School became background noise. Buzzing lectures, suspicious glances, silent lunches. Nina, his closest friend from AP English, noticed the distance. You've been ghosting me, she said one afternoon, catching up to him by the lockers. Khalil gave her a half smile. Just got a lot going on. She leaned against the metal, watching him. You always do. But this is different. He didn't respond. You know, she added, you don't have to do everything alone. He paused. Thought of telling her. Thought of showing her the confirmation email. The training schedule. The notebooks. But he didn't. Some things. I do, he said instead. She studied him for another second. Then nodded. Okay. Just don't disappear. He gave her a nod. But he was already gone in his mind. Back to the problems, back to the goal. The night before the competition, the school was quieter than usual. A Friday evening. Students had scattered to football games and house parties. The faculty lounge was dark. Dr. Granger sat in his office, a single lamp casting a yellow cone across his desk. He sipped coffee, scrolling through his email. Most of it was nonsense. District updates, grading deadlines. Then one subject line caught his eye. Regional Championship Final Roster, confirmed entries. He clicked it. The PDF loaded slowly, each line revealing names he already knew. His hand hovered over the mouse as he skimmed the list. Then line 15. Participant Khalil Harris. School. Hamilton Prep. Category Advanced Placement. Independent entry. Granger stared at the screen. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then he sat back slowly, lips curling into a cold, practiced smile. Oh, he muttered. So that's what he's been up to. He clicked on Khalil's name. No faculty sponsor listed. No team affiliation. Just one name. One entry. And a quiet defiance written in digital ink. He opened a new email. To championship coordinator. Subject entry discrepancy. Urgent. He began to type. The day before the competition, Dr. Granger finds Khalil's name on the registrant list. The air in Dr. Granger's office turned icy the moment Khalil's name appeared on that registration list. For nearly a minute he just stared at the screen, the name pulsing back at him like a challenge. Khalil Harris. Independent entry. Hamilton Prep. He stood abruptly, knocking over his coffee mug. The dark liquid splashed across a pile of student quizzes, seeping into the corners, but he didn't flinch. His attention was fixed now, sharp, surgical, and trained on one objective. Remove. Granger paced. He knew the rules of the competition inside and out. He'd coached this team for 11 years. He knew how to manipulate registration deadlines, how to push weak students off the roster, without ever getting caught. But this was different. Khalil had bypassed him entirely, and worse, he'd done it by the book. But Granger wasn't worried about the rule book. He was worried about what might happen if that boy stood on a stage and solved problems under lights. What happens if they clap for him? He picked up the phone and dialed. Knight Carter Academic Board. This is Dana. This is Dr. Walter Granger, he said, voice cool. Faculty advisor from Hamilton Prep. I'm calling about a discrepancy in your final roster. Of course. Is this about the regional math championship? Yes, he replied. I noticed a name on your list. Khalil Harris. He's listed as an independent from our school. There was a pause on the line. Yes, we received his entry via the open portal, Dana said. Is there an issue? Granger leaned on his desk. He's under academic probation. At Hamilton. There are concerns about the integrity of his work. Dana hesitated. That wasn't noted in the system. It wouldn't be, Granger replied smoothly. It's an internal process, still ongoing, but I'm afraid allowing him to compete would undermine the values of the championship. More silence. Do you have documentation of the allegations? No formal charges yet, he said, but I'm advising you as the faculty sponsor. It's irregular for a student under disciplinary scrutiny to represent the school, independent or not. Dana's voice stiffened. We'll review the entry. If he doesn't meet the academic standards, we'll follow up. Granger's lips curved slightly. Thank you. He hung up and exhaled. It felt satisfying, momentarily. But then, a voice behind him. So you're trying to block him from competing? Granger turned fast. Standing in the open doorway was Miss Janney, the new AP literature teacher. Late 20s, curly brown hair tied up, glasses pushed halfway up her nose. She held a stack of poetry papers in her arms. But her face was unreadable. Granger blinked. Excuse me? I heard you, she said. You're trying to get Khalil removed from a math competition. His expression hardened. This is none of your concern, Miss Janney. It is when a student's being targeted without cause. Granger folded his arms. He's under review. Because you filed a complaint with no proof. And now you're making calls behind his back. Her tone wasn't angry. It was worse. Calm. Controlled. Certain. You're new here, he said coldly. So let me give you some advice. Don't involve yourself in matters beyond your scope. Matters like what? Like black students outperforming expectations? Granger's jaw tightened. Miss Janney stepped fully into the room. I've seen him in my class. He's sharp, focused, quiet, but every time he raises his hand, you act like it's a challenge instead of a contribution. He submitted work far beyond his level. He's suspicious, and that's reason enough for review, but not for erasure, she replied. He took a step toward her. Do you know what kind of academic damage a false prodigy can do when left unchecked? Do you know how many students cheat their way through exceptions? I know how many are never given the chance to try. She snapped. They stared at each other for a long, loaded second. Then she said quietly, You're not afraid he's cheating. You're afraid he's better than you ever expected. Granger didn't respond. Ms. Janney stepped back toward the door. I'll be watching this, Dr. Granger. And I'm not the only one. She left without waiting for a reply. Granger's hands curled into fists. At home that night, Khalil sat on the floor of his bedroom, surrounded by printouts. He had built a mini fortress out of graph paper, study guides, and mock questions. On his wall he'd taped a self-made countdown, regional championship, 1 day left. His mother peeked in once, saw the intensity on his face, and closed the door quietly. Khalil's eyes were heavy, but his mind was sharp. He worked through one problem after another. When he got one wrong, he rewrote the entire solution, until he could do it without hesitation. He didn't look at the clock anymore. Time had stopped mattering. Around midnight, a quiet knock echoed at the door. He opened it. No one was there. Just a plain white envelope on the mat. No name, no label, just a thin sealed envelope with his name scribbled in block letters. Call. He looked around. The street was still. The porch light buzzed faintly. He closed the door, sat at his desk, and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Printed in bold type. You don't belong on that stage. Pull out now. Final warning. No signature, no school letterhead. Just that one sentence, centered and cold. Khalil stared at it, unmoving. His pulse thudded in his ears. He'd expected resistance, maybe sabotage, but this was fear, not his theirs. And that meant he was close to something real. He folded the letter slowly, then opened his drawer and placed it under his stack of solved problems. He wasn't pulling out, not now. Khalil receives an anonymous envelope the night before the competition, with a threat inside. The building rose like a fortress. Polished stone steps, glass doors too clean to touch, and a metal banner arcing overhead. Whitford Regional Academic Center. Beneath it, students filed in with matching blazers and polished shoes, some holding clipboards, others flanked by teachers who patted their backs and whispered last-minute tips. Khalil stood at the bottom of the steps for a moment, watching them walk in pairs and groups, clustered like they'd rehearsed their excellence. He walked in alone. Inside, the air was cool, humming with quiet tension. The main auditorium looked more like an amphitheater, circular seating rising in tiers, sleek wood paneling on the walls, a stage polished to near mirror reflection. Banners for Knight Carter University hung behind the judges' table. A row of cameras was already positioned in the center aisle, lenses trained on the empty stage. Khalil approached the check-in table, shoulders squared. The woman behind it barely looked up. School? Independent, he replied. She scanned her clipboard, then hesitated when she saw his name. Khalil Harris, right. You're not affiliated with a team. No. A pause. Her tone cooled slightly. Sit in the left center row. Wait for your name to be called. Khalil took his badge and walked past the whispering volunteer. His name badge didn't list a school, just participant on Ren 44. No hometown, no logo, just a boy with a face none of them expected to see here. As he reached his seat, a familiar voice sliced through the din behind him. Well, look who found a back door. Khalil didn't have to turn, he knew that voice. Dr. Granger. He turned slowly anyway. The teacher stood in a navy blazer, school pin on the lapel, a paper cup of coffee in one hand, his eyes crinkled with a tight, performative smile. Brave of you to show up considering your circumstance. Khalil's voice was even. I followed the rules. Granger stepped closer, his voice low. You should have followed instincts instead. Because once they see who you really are, this little fantasy ends. Khalil didn't respond. Granger leaned in. One mistake, Harris. One stumble. That's all it takes for them to believe what they already suspect. He walked off before Khalil could answer. His words echoed anyway. In the back row, the students from Hamilton Prep sat like royalty, matching jackets, portfolios open, pencils lined in neat rows. Granger's top student, Declan Maddox, tall, smug, blonde, nodded as Granger whispered something in his ear. Declan glanced at Khalil with the same look one might give a stray. The announcer stepped onto the stage. A tall woman in a silver blazer, voice clipped and bright. Welcome to the 18th Annual Whitford Regional Mathematics Championship. We're thrilled to welcome the best young minds from across the county. Her voice faded in Khalil's ears. His pulse thumped louder. Each round will feature 2 parts, speed and precision. Top scorers advance. Finalists will compete in a live problem-solving showdown. Khalil exhaled, gripping his pencil tighter. He was here. He'd made it past the barriers, the threats, the erasure. Now came the work. The first round began. 30 participants, 10 minutes, 15 problems projected on the screen. Begin. Khalil's pencil moved like water. No hesitation, no doubt. Derivatives, optimization, complex functions. He didn't pause. He didn't flinch. Around him, others hesitated, whispered, erased. Time slipped past. Pens down. The papers were collected. Second round. Application problems. Word-based, long-form logic. 2 examples. both deliberately vague, each one a trap for the overconfident. Khalil closed his eyes for 2 seconds before starting. Then he attacked the page. As he worked, he could feel eyes shifting toward him. A student 2 rose up, turned once, peeking at his sheet. Another, behind him, muttered to a friend, "Who is that kid?" After the break, scores were posted. Top 5 advancing. 1. Declan Maddox, Hamilton Prep. 2. Khalil Harris, independent entry. A rustle of whispers moved through the auditorium. Khalil's name stood alone on the list. No school, no coach. Granger stared at the screen like it had malfunctioned. Declan looked over his shoulder, locking eyes with Khalil. He mouthed something with a smirk. Fluke. Khalil ignored him. Final round. The showdown. 2 participants. 1 problem. Live solution. Audience watching. Judges scoring for clarity, logic, and innovation. The announcer returned. And now for the final face-off. Declan Maddox of Hamilton Prep. Applause erupted from the back row. Granger clapped stiffly, jaw tight. And Khalil Harris, independent participant. A strange, uncomfortable silence followed. Then a few hesitant claps, mostly from the camera crew. Some parents looked confused. One judge leaned to another and whispered something. Khalil stood, walking to the stage alone.
No teacher, no team.
Just him. He took his place at one of the 2 chalkboards facing the crowd. Declan stood at the other, smirking, arms crossed like he was ready for a photo shoot. A judge stepped forward, unfolding a paper. Your problem is as follows. The judge read the prompt, a composite function problem with parametric equations, nested constraints, and a catch hidden in the boundary conditions. Khalil's heart pounded, not because it was hard, but because it was clever, written to begin. Khalil wrote the first line without thinking, then the second, then stop. He scanned the prompt again. There it was. A trick. The parametric variable didn't map as expected. It was reversed in the second function. He set up to trap anyone who assumed linearity. He smiled slightly, then kept writing. Declan was moving fast, too fast. He was solving from memorized patterns. Efficient, confident, wrong. Khalil rewrote the equation, adjusted the domain, inverted the parameter, then substituted the transformed function. His board began to fill in quiet, elegant steps. Clean math, no theatrics, just truth. 5 minutes passed. Declan's board was full. Khalil's board was only halfway. Granger leaned forward in his seat, whispering furiously to a judge. The judge frowned but didn't move. 7 minutes. Declan stepped back, folded his arms, smug. Khalil wrote 2 final lines. Then slowly, underlined the answer. The bell rang. Time. Both students stepped back. The judges stood, 1 step to each board. They examined, pointed, whispered. A third judge approached the microphone. We will now score the solutions based on accuracy and method. The judge paused. 1 contestant solved quickly, but overlooked a boundary error in the transformation. The audience stirred. Only 1 solution is fully correct. Kal stood still. Declan shifted, then frowned. A judge raised a hand. This problem goes to participant number 44, Khalil Harris. Silence. Then a few scattered claps, but no applause, no cheers. Granger didn't move. Declan's jaw dropped. What? The announcer stepped forward, unsure whether to smile. Congratulations to our regional champion, Khalil Harris. Khalil didn't raise his hands. He didn't beam. He just stared at the rows of unfamiliar, unrateable faces. He had won, and yet no one celebrated. Khalil reaches the final round, facing off against Dr. Granger's top student. The lights on stage felt hotter now, sharper, brighter, as if calibrated to test more than intellect. Khalil stood beside the chalkboard, his victory barely announced, his applause scattered and cold. The cameras kept rolling, but the crowd gave nothing back. No ovation, no validation, just uncomfortable silence wrapped in professional politeness. The announcer's voice barely registered anymore. She handed Khalil a slim envelope marked champion, which he accepted with a brief nod. Declan stepped off the stage stiffly, lips pressed tight in disbelief. Granger met him at the stairs, placing a hand on his shoulder, whispering something harsh. Declan yanked his arm free. Khalil stood alone at the center. The head judge cleared his throat. We'd like to offer our champion a special tiebreaker challenge. An optional problem to be completed live for additional distinction. He paused, looking directly at Khalil. Would you be willing? Khalil hesitated. It wasn't in the rules. Nothing about a bonus round had been discussed, but the implication hung heavy in the judge's voice. Prove it again. One last test. Just to be sure. I'll do it, Khalil said. The announcer gave a tight smile. Excellent. One problem, 10 minutes. Full solution. Live demonstration. A staffer rushed backstage. After a few minutes, she returned with a typed sheet of paper. The judge read the problem aloud, then clipped it to the board.
Evaluate the integral of 2x.
Khalil's eyes scanned the expression once, and something inside him stopped. The moment was subtle, but immediate. He blinked again. Reread the problem. His breath shortened, not from panic but recognition. This wasn't a regular question. It was a trap. Because the function was improper at xe2, the limit approaches infinity. The original version of this problem had limits from 0 to 1. But this version, with the upper limit at 2, this version diverged. Deliberate or not, it was a classic sabotage method. If a student solved it using normal rules, they'd land on a clean-looking answer, but it would be mathematically invalid. His mind raced. Did they expect him to miss it? To solve it straight and look foolish? To validate their doubt? He looked out into the crowd. Granger leaned back in his chair, face unreadable. But his eyes, those cold eyes, were watching every movement. Khalil stepped toward the board slowly, picked up the chalk. He could solve it incorrectly, and play it safe. Let them nod, let them discredit him later. Or he could rewrite the problem as it should have been, and let the truth speak louder than the trap. He took a breath, lifted the chalk, and struck a line through the upper limit. A collective murmur swept the audience. He wrote again. Corrected. Inch from 0 to 1 of 2x. Then, without a word, he began solving. He explained each step aloud as he wrote. Deliberate, calm, fluent. We begin by substituting u, e, x corpore. Then we differentiate, do e 2x dx. Our integral transforms into. His chalk moved in clean strokes. Symbols flowed across the board like music. In the back rows, a few students began nodding. One leaned toward his neighbor. Wait, he caught it. The divergent. Another whispered, that was a trick problem. He fixed it live. Within minutes, Khalil reached the final expression. A clean, finite value. He boxed it with a line beneath. Set down the chalk. Then he turned around and stepped away. The room was silent. The judges stared at the board. One whispered to another. The head judge's brow furrowed, then slowly lifted. He stood. Ladies and gentlemen, he said carefully, what you just witnessed is not only mathematically correct, it is mathematically necessary. The crowd murmured. He recognized a fundamental flaw in the problem and resolved it accurately, without assistance, under pressure, and with full clarity. He turned to Khalil. That level of insight is rare at any age, let alone in this setting. Someone began clapping. Then another. And finally, full applause. Loud. Sustained. Real. Khalil stood frozen for a moment. Then his eyes flicked to Granger. The man didn't clap. Didn't smile. He sat stone still, jaw clenched, face pale beneath the lights. Backstage, someone captured the moment on their phone. The final solution, the crossed-out error, the calm correction, the roar of applause. It hit the internet before Khalil even left the building. By the time he got home that evening, the clip had been reposted on 2 math forums and 3 educator subreddits. By midnight, it was trending on TikTok with the caption, "Black student outsmarts rigged math problem." He didn't even know until Nina called him. "Khalil, you're going viral."
What?
He mumbled. He was lying on his bed, still in his dress shirt, the envelope unopened on his nightstand. "There's a video, your correction. People are dissecting the problem. Everyone's saying it was deliberate. Some guy from MIT retweeted it." He sat up. "What? Dude," she said. "You need to check your email. And maybe brace yourself." He logged in. Hundreds of notifications. One from a local news outlet, requesting an interview. Another from Knight Carter University, asking to confirm his attendance. And one more from a blocked sender. No subject, just a file attachment. He hesitated, then clicked it open. It was a screen recording. Someone had recorded a Zoom call. The image was blurry, but the voices were unmistakable. Granger's voice. "Just insert a variation. Raise the upper limit." He won't notice, he doesn't think in constraints. He memorizes. Another voice, possibly Declan's. "What if he catches it? Granger again. Then we disqualify him for modifying the problem. Either way, he doesn't walk out looking like a genius. The clip ended. Khalil stared at the screen, heart pounding. This wasn't just sabotage. This was premeditated academic sabotage, recorded and leaked. He closed his laptop. The chalkboard didn't lie, but someone else had just made sure the world knew it. A viral video starts circulating of the moment, and it exposes more than just the competition. By Monday morning, Khalil's face had been seen by more people than lived in his entire neighborhood. Not his face smiling or celebrating, but caught mid-thought, standing beside a chalkboard, under fire, rewriting a flawed problem with quiet defiance. The video was 47 seconds long. That was all it took. Someone on Twitter clipped it and captioned it, "Black genius outsmarts rigged math problem, live." The comments exploded. He didn't just solve it, he corrected it. Imagine being so brilliant, they have to sabotage you. This is the kind of black excellence that gets buried on purpose. Then came the duets, TikToks dissecting the math, educators explaining the trap, college professors from Stanford and Howard reposting with stunned commentary. By lunchtime, Khalil Harris was trending nationwide, and he still hadn't said a word. The clip circulated without context, then with too much. Speculation bloomed. Conspiracies, think pieces, fan edits, memes. Someone even made an AI animation of him snapping the chalk like a samurai sword. But back at Hamilton Prep, none of it felt like victory. The main office stayed quiet. Too quiet. No announcements, no press, no official acknowledgement from the school. In the hallway, students whispered as he passed. Some nodded, others stared. A few looked guilty. Most looked nervous, like being too close to him might be dangerous. In third period, Nina slid into the seat beside him. "You've seen it?" she whispered. He nodded. "Yeah. You okay?" Khalil stared down at his blank notebook. "I don't know yet." She leaned closer. "They're already scrambling. I heard Granger didn't show up for school today." Khalil looked up. "What?" "Yeah. And no one's saying why." He exhaled. It made sense. The clip, the Zoom audio, the correction in front of judges. It was all too public now. "Something's coming," she said softly. "I can feel it." At lunch, the head of the math department, who hadn't spoken to Khalil all year, approached him in the courtyard. "You should focus on your studies," she said coolly. "The internet has a short memory." He stared at her. "You saw the video." "I saw a performance." Khalil didn't reply. "Don't let attention distract you from reality," she added. He wanted to laugh. This was reality. The denial, the backpedaling, the careful distance. They weren't shocked that he was good. They were terrified the world had noticed. That evening, his mother sat at the kitchen table, flipping through emails from reporters and foundations, offering to amplify Khalil's voice. She wore a look he hadn't seen before, somewhere between pride and dread. "You haven't said much," she said. "I don't know what to say."
They're calling you a genius, she whispered.
He stared at the floor, and the school's pretending nothing happened. "Because if they admit it," she said, "they admit the rest." Khalil nodded. The rest. That he was never supposed to be in that class. That the tests were designed to fail him. That his brilliance wasn't just unexpected. It was inconvenient. That night, the school board released a public statement, 2 paragraphs, measured language. "We are aware of the video circulating regarding a recent academic competition. We commend all participants for their engagement and excellence. Any concerns raised regarding the structure of questions or internal faculty practices are being reviewed as a routine matter. We caution the public against drawing conclusions without full context." Routine matter. The words felt surgical. The statement didn't mention Khalil by name. Didn't mention Dr. Granger. Didn't mention anything at all, really. Just a fog of formality designed to blur the truth. The next day, Khalil returned to class. Granger's door was locked. A substitute handed out worksheets, avoiding eye contact. In the hall, a white student he didn't know clapped him on the back. "You showed him, man." Then another. "They'll probably offer you a scholarship now." Khalil stared at him. "I don't want a reward. I want the system fixed." The boy shrugged. "That's not how it works." In AP English, Nina passed him a note. "They're coming for you. Be ready." After school, a meeting was announced for select faculty and leadership. Closed door, whispers floated through the halls. Internal review, damage control, grievance procedure. But no one asked Khalil for his version of the story. The media kept calling. So did strangers. Some messages were uplifting, others were threatening. One voicemail said, "Stay in your lane, boy." Khalil played it twice, then deleted it. But things shifted again on Thursday. The twist didn't come from the board. It didn't come from a press conference or a leaked Zoom call. It came from an anonymous Reddit post, posted in a small academic subthread, then reposted to Twitter. The thread began simply, "I used to work with Granger. Here's what you need to know." Attached were screenshots of internal school emails, some more than a year old. The emails showed Granger forwarding student work, mocking overconfident placement kids, calling one another affirmative action gamble. In another, he warned staff about lowering standards for the sake of appearances. But one email, dated just 2 weeks before Khalil's registration, hit like a hammer. "If he shows up to regionals, it'll be a disaster. Someone better make sure that never happens." The language was clear, calculated. Not angry, strategic. The internet exploded. This isn't just sabotage, it's racial gatekeeping. Granger wasn't trying to protect standards. He was protecting exclusion. How many other kids did this happen to? News outlets picked it up within hours. Expose Granger started trending. Local journalists camped outside the school by Friday morning. The school board released another statement. This time, the tone had changed. "We are launching an internal investigation into allegations of faculty misconduct. Dr. Walter Granger has been placed on temporary administrative leave pending review." Temporary leave. Khalil read the words again. Granger was gone, but only just, and still no one had called to hear from him. An anonymous post leaks Dr. Granger's emails, with racist language inside. The emails didn't just ruin Dr. Granger, they unraveled something far bigger. In the days that followed the leak, online investigators, journalists, and even former students started connecting dots no one had dared touch before. It began with timestamps, recipients, subject lines, academic patterns that seemed random, until they weren't. One thread led to a private Google group titled Scholars of Merit, a closed invitation-only network of faculty advisors from elite schools across the state. Its purpose? On the surface, it was framed as a professional development space for sharing academic resources, best practices, and competition strategies. But once former moderators came forward, some out of guilt, others out of fear, what lay beneath that surface became impossible to deny. Emails dated as far back as 2016 detailed risk assessments of incoming students, color-coded spreadsheets marked with names, scores, race, and vague behavior notes. A black student flagged as high energy, a Latina marked parent as aggressive. No academic violations, just tone. There was a recurring phrase across dozens of emails: "Preserve the integrity of the competition." It became clear what that actually meant: preserve control. In one email, Granger wrote, "We cannot dilute the merit pool. When non-traditional students outperform expectations, it skews the scholarship data and creates PR nightmares. Let's hold the line." He wasn't alone. Other names repeated across threads: faculty from prep schools, judges from regional competitions, even a few early college consultants. They referred to it as soft vetting. Students were quietly flagged, blacklisted, rerouted. Khalil's name was on the most recent list, highlighted in yellow. Beside it, probation, unknown origin, no sponsor, do not elevate. He hadn't just been a target, he'd been a case study. By the end of the week, multiple universities were forced to respond. The Knight Carter Foundation, which had sponsored the math championship, released a carefully worded statement disavowing the group. But their hands weren't clean either. Screenshots surfaced showing their scholarship review board receiving emails directly from the Scholars of Merit listserv, emails containing concerns about applicants, unverified, unchallenged, unquestioned. And the more the internet unearthed, the more it looked like this had never been about just one teacher. Granger had been a node in a web, a gatekeeper in a network that wasn't built to let kids like Khalil in. It was built to make sure they stayed out. At home, Khalil watched it all unfold, like someone half awake. Every headline bore his name. Student exposes academic gatekeeping ring. Black teen uncovers hidden network in elite education. A quiet genius breaks open the system. People said his name with admiration now. Strangers online called him a warrior, a whistleblower, a prodigy, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like exposure. Tanya, his mother, had stopped watching the news. Instead, she'd taken to walking in the evenings, pacing the block with her phone off. Her worry had shifted from Khalil, being erased, to him becoming too visible. "You cracked something," she told him one night. Eyes heavy. "And when something cracks, the people who built it come running." He nodded, said nothing. There were emails in his inbox from senators, advocacy groups, school reformers. Most asked for interviews, statements, collaborations. Some wanted him to be the face of a national campaign. He'd been offered a chance to speak at an education equity summit, but the invitation that arrived on Friday morning came from a name he didn't expect: Columbia University. The subject line read, "Private consultation request. Opportunity regarding early admission." His heart skipped. He opened the email slowly. The body was short, polite, warm. It congratulated him on his extraordinary performance. It acknowledged recent media events. Then, after a few pleasantries, it offered him something that didn't feel real: a seat in their upcoming freshman cohort, full scholarship, housing covered, travel stipend. The final paragraph, however, froze him. "We'd prefer, however, that you not participate further in any public discussions regarding the recent academic controversy. We believe your story is more powerful as a symbol of resilience than as an ongoing political flashpoint." Khalil reread the line twice. They wanted him in, but only if he went silent. Only if he stopped talking about the system that tried to destroy him. Only if he became the image, but not the voice. He closed the laptop slowly. His room was quiet. The wall still had his competition certificate taped beside a sticky note that read, "Don't shrink." He stared at it now like it was mocking him. That afternoon, Nina met him at the library. She watched him closely as he paced between the bookshelves. "They gave you the offer," she said. He nodded. "Yeah. And? It's real. Scholarship. Early placement. And?" she repeated. "There's a condition."
What kind?
"They don't want me to keep speaking." She blinked. "They want you to disappear." "Not disappear," he said bitterly. "Just smile and shut up." Nina didn't smile. "You gonna take it?" "I don't know. Because this is what they do. They pick one, reward them, make them the exception, and the rest get buried again." He leaned against the shelf, hands in his pockets. "What if I say no? What if nothing else comes? Then you keep showing up. You keep being loud, and eventually someone opens a door you didn't even know was there." He looked at her. "And if no one does, then we build our own." She said it with such certainty that for the first time in days, he let himself believe it might be possible. But as they left the library, his phone buzzed again. Another email. This one from a name he didn't recognize. Anonymous tips, educatejustice.org. Subject line, "He's not alone." He opened it. Inside was a list. Names. Dozens. All flagged students from the Scholars of Merit database. Many marked with the same yellow code as his. Most from the past 3 years. And at the bottom, in bold, "What will you do with this?" A prestigious college reaches out to Khalil, but only if he stays silent. The call came just after sunset. Khalil was sitting on the back steps, headphones in, trying to block out the noise inside the house. TV news anchors speculating, phones vibrating, his mother's voice shifting between hope and exhaustion every time another journalist called. He stared at the sky, dusky and wide, when his phone lit up with an unknown number, 617 area code. "Boston," he answered without a word. A warm, practiced voice came through the speaker. "Is this Khalil Harris? This is Dean Whitaker from the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at Harvard University. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" He sat up straighter. "Yes, sir." The voice on the other end was precise, professional, but not cold. He congratulated Khalil, mentioned how the faculty had been deeply moved by his academic strength and personal resolve. He said they'd seen the footage, read the interviews, watched the debate unfold online. Then came the offer: full ride, early acceptance, guaranteed housing and mentorship. It was everything. Until the pause. "We'd also like to talk privately about your future role in public narratives," the dean said. Khalil's fingers curled slightly. "What do you mean?" "We understand this has been an emotional and politicized journey. As an institution, we prefer to keep incoming students focused on growth, not controversy. We'd ask, respectfully, that you refrain from further media engagement or public comments that might escalate the situation." The words were clean, gentle, but they rang hollow. He knew what they meant. They wanted him to stop talking, to step out of the light now that his face had served its purpose. The dean added, "Of course, this request isn't contractual. We simply hope to maintain a calm academic environment, for your sake." Khalil swallowed. I understand. Excellent. The voice said. We look forward to your decision. They hung up. He stared at the phone, blank screen glowing faintly in the growing dark. Inside the house, Tanya watched him from the kitchen window. When he finally came back in, her eyes tracked him. You okay? She asked. He didn't answer. She set down her mug. Was it them? He nodded. Harvard. She paused. They offered it? Yeah. Her hands folded slowly. What's the condition? No more controversy. Her expression cracked. She looked away, then back. And you're thinking about it? I'd be stupid not to. Would you? She said softly. He stared at her. She walked over and sat across from him at the table. You want a life outside all this? I get it. I want that for you too. I want you to sleep at night. I want you to walk into a lecture hall and not wonder if they're watching you to fail. Then, maybe I should say yes. But if you do, she said, what happens to the next kid? The one who won't get a call after they speak up? He lowered his eyes. She reached for his hand. Baby, I spent my whole life trying to keep us safe. But there's a difference between surviving and living. Don't mistake one for the other. That night, Nina came over. They sat in the garage, legs crossed, books between them but unopened. I heard about the Harvard call, she said. Khalil nodded. They gave you everything, huh? Pretty much. And they don't want me doing any more interviews or talking about the files. Nina's voice was flat. So they want the brand, not the boy. He looked at her. Is that wrong? No, it's real, it's the world. But you have to decide if you're going to be a story they tell or a truth they can't erase. He exhaled. Everyone wants a version of me. The media wants the fighter. Harvard wants the quiet genius. Granger wanted the mistake. I don't even know which one I am anymore. She reached over and touched his wrist. You're the only one who knows what happened. And they're all scared of that. The next morning, his phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time, from a production studio. A talk show. National. They wanted him live. Not pre-recorded. No script. A chance to say everything. To show his face. To name what they'd tried to bury. He stared at the invitation. Accepted. Word spread fast. By afternoon, students gathered outside the school gates. Some with signs. Others with questions. A few with tears. The story had become bigger than him now. A former student stepped forward and told her story, how Granger had discouraged her from pursuing STEM. A parent came forward with records showing their child's unexplained removal from a competition roster. A local reporter ran a segment titled, How Many Doors Were Quietly Locked? Tanya sat across from Khalil that night, arms folded tight. You sure about this? He nodded. Yeah. She didn't smile. But she didn't stop him. At the studio, the lights were cold and clinical. A young assistant led him to a green room. A makeup artist powdered his face without speaking. Producers moved like ghosts with clipboards. He sat on the couch alone, waiting for the countdown. Then, footsteps, a shadow, and then a voice that made his spine stiffen. Well, you finally made it. Khalil turned. Standing just inside the doorway was Dr. Granger, wearing a tailored suit, holding a file. Face calm, eyes calculating. The producer behind him stammered. He said he was invited by the network. That Khalil stood slowly. Granger stepped in. I'm not here to fight, he said. I'm here to talk. You've done enough of that. Granger held up the file. Then let me show you something. Khalil stared at him. Why would I believe anything you show me? Because if you go out there without it, you'll only know half the truth. Khalil schedules a live interview and Dr. Granger shows up backstage. The green room's lights glowed harshly, turning faces into stencils. The hum of cables, camera lenses turning, producers murmuring in corners, all of it pressed on Khalil's skin like tension in the air. He sat rigid on the couch, heart thumping loud enough to hear. He glanced at his phone. 0:30 until live. No retreat now. Then the door cracked open. Dr. Walter Granger entered. Jacket buttoned, footsteps deliberate. The makeup crew froze. Producers turned. Granger's face was neutral. No anger. Only calculation. Khalil, he said, voice low but carrying into the stillness. We need to talk. Khalil stood fast. We already did. On stage. With a problem you altered. Granger's eyes flickered. He clasped his hands behind him. I'm here to help you, in the only way I can. Khalil narrowed his eyes. Help? By threatening me? By sabotaging my entry? By trying to silence me when I proved you wrong? The older man sighed. A long breath, as though weighing every word. You don't understand what's at stake. If you go public, if you expose all this, people won't just be mad at me. They'll come after you. Your future, your reputation, your college. They'll try to bury you. Quietly. They'll doubt your results, your character. That's already happening, Khalil said. They've leaked your emails. They're calling me a poster child. They've offered me Harvard if I go silent. Granger's face softened, eyes flickering behind that mask. That's the offer. The compromise. You can have the dream, and not the war. Khalil's jaw clenched. I don't want the dream if it's just a silence in exchange. Granger took a slow step forward. I know people who can erase the doubts, who can make sure your numbers look flawless. He pulled papers from his file. I have documentation, emails, correspondence between you and competition organizers, problems you solved before you were registered. You can walk into the interview with the defense already built. Khalil's breath caught. He looked at those papers. He saw spreadsheets showing Khalil's name, problem sets, timestamps. The evidence could back him, or trap him. You want me to play your sanitized hero, Granger said, lowering his voice. I'll give you the narrative you want. Quiet, dignified, unthreatening. But the moment you cross that line, you're alone. Khalil's pulse pounded. The files sat between them like a razor's edge. Why now? Khalil asked. You control this school. You bend systems. Why expose it now? Granger's shoulders tightened. Because if you expose it, I lose control too. All of us in that network lose control. The consequences are bigger than you or me. Khalil shook his head. No, consequences are always bigger than you. Or maybe you never believed that until someone forced you to see. Granger's eyes flickered. Then he straightened. You don't have to do this now. You can wait. Let us contain it. Let us guide what people see. Khalil stepped forward, resolute. No, the world already sees, and they're asking questions. I refuse to answer shyly. Granger's face darkened. You're making enemies. Powerful ones. People who don't tolerate noise. Khalil swallowed. Let them come. A producer peered in. We're live in 10. His voice trembled slightly. The gravity hit everyone in the room. Granger looked at Khalil as though he could still persuade. The seconds ticked down. Khalil's gaze hardened. This is more than me. It's for the kids erased behind doors, buried in silence. I won't carry a story where they can't talk to. Granger's jaw flexed. He opened his mouth, as though to say something, guilt, threat, apology, but no words came. The door to the next room cracked. The host's voice called. We go live in 5. Khalil's vision narrowed. Noise blurred. All that mattered was what he'd yield, what he'd refuse. Granger stepped back. Then do as you wish. But no, if this backfires, there's no salvage. Not for you. Khalil nodded. I'm ready. Lights flooded the hallway as a stagehand signaled. Granger turned and exited. The door hissed closed behind him. Khalil exhaled sharply, swallowed down anger, fear, anticipation. He glanced in the mirror, as though seeing himself for the first time. The boy who fought for every chance in a world that tried to shut him out. A knock. The producer. 2 minutes. He rose, squared his shoulders, walked toward the stage. The world was watching. The interview begins. Broadcast to millions. The studio lights felt as bright as fire. On live TV, Khalil sat upright behind a polished desk, cameras circling him, the host seated across. The teleprompters glowed, but he had no script. He had truth. He had weight. He had silence to fill. The host began with polite professionalism. Welcome back. Tonight we are honored to host Khalil Harris, whose remarkable performance in a regional math competition and the revelations that followed have captured national attention. Thank you for being here. Khalil nodded. He cleared his throat. The audience in the studio sat hushed, rows of blinking cameras behind them. Remote viewers clicked in by the millions. He spoke, thank you. I'm not here to be inspirational. I'm here because this system tried to erase me, and I intend to make sure it can't erase the truth. He paused. Let that sink in. The host nodded, watching every micro-expression. I want to start by naming names. Dr. Walter Granger. He changed the final problem when he believed no one would notice. He manipulated limits. He removed me from internal lists. He flagged me unjustly. He used a private academic network to suppress students who didn't fit his mold. Gasps rippled through the studio audience. The host's eyes widened. On split screens around the world, commentators fanned out their notes. Khalil continued. Emails seized from school servers show that this wasn't an isolated act. Granger's network, Scholars of Merit, has been trading lists, flags, dossiers for years, targeting students of color under euphemisms of integrity and risk assessment. He leaned forward, voice controlled but fierce. The emails speak plainly: names, colors, timestamps, qualitative reservations about certain demographics. Don't let these anomalies skew our data. These are not slip-ups. These are policy. This is gating disguised as fairness. When he showed a screenshot of one email, highlighting the line, "If he shows up, it'll be a disaster," the host's face drained. The audience murmured. The screen zoomed. Viewers clicked pause to read. Khalil went on. To Harvard, to all those who offered me silence. No, this story does not belong to you. It belongs to every student who was removed quietly. Every name erased in a drawer. Every spark of brilliance discounted. The host asked, soft but firm, "What do you want next?" Khalil looked straight into the camera. The weight of that gaze carried to living rooms across America. I want investigations. I want transparency. I want the documents unsealed. I want policy reform so that no teacher, advisor, or elite network can secretly gatekeep based on color. I want a world where a quiet black boy solving integrals isn't considered a threat. Clap, quiet, rising. Then fierce applause filled the studio. The host held up his hand for silence. Cameras panned to reaction faces. Teachers, students, parents watched. Within seconds, the clip was clipped and reshared. Black student exposes academic conspiracy live. Hashtags flew. Expose Granger. Eyes open. Math for all. Videos of students in classrooms watching, whispering. Teachers forwarding the clip in staff rooms. In the hours after the broadcast, statements poured in. Harvard's admissions office released a statement retracting the earlier offer with silence clause and formally apologizing. We recognize now that an offer that demands silence undermines the very values of academic integrity and free will. We invite Khalil to reconsider a full scholarship, with no strings. State education boards initiated probes. Local districts asked for internal audits. Civil rights organizations issued press releases. Within 24 hours, a coalition of students across 50 high schools organized solidarity walkouts. They carried chalkboard signs, "Let Black Minds Shine. We demand equity, not exception." Back in Hamilton Prep, the hallways were swelling. Students with banners and smartphones. Teachers watched from doorways. Administrators became shadows behind windows. Late that night, Khalil sat with his mother in their dim living room. The glow from the TV replayed snippets of his live appearance, the montage of headlines. He was tired, but his eyes were alight with something that felt like possibility. Tanya hugged him, lightly, but with fierce protectiveness. "You changed something," she whispered. He swallowed. "I hope so." He didn't tell her yet about the unopened shelf of files he'd found in the hidden archives, the folders stamped 2023 Granger Review, or the names he wasn't yet ready to call aloud. In the morning, the school announced a press conference. Principal Brenner, board members, legal counsel, journalists swarming the steps. The crowd that had gathered outside Hamilton Prep numbered in the hundreds. Smartphones held aloft. Signs raised high. From inside, the administration sealed off entry. Students lined up outside. Teachers tried to manage. News vans parked at the curb. The wind carried murmurs. "Is Khalil speaking? They're going to try to control it. We want accountability." Inside the conference room, the principal cleared his throat, prepared remarks in hand. The board members sat stiffly to the side. Legal counsel shifted in seat. Journalists held recorders, pens poised. But the first question before the principal even spoke came from a reporter. "Where is Khalil Harris? Is he coming?" Silence stretched. Then a staffer motioned toward the door. All eyes turned. And there he walked in. Step by step, toward every camera, every microphone, every expectant face. He held his posture. He held their attention. He held the moment. The school announces a press conference, and everyone expects Khalil to attend. The auditorium was darker than before. The same seats, the same stage, the same polished floors. But tonight it felt changed, alive. The murmurs in the crowd rolled like waves, building, swelling, carrying excitement, expectation, reclamation. Khalil Harris walked up the aisle, not as a visitor, but as someone who had redefined what it meant to belong there. He passed rows of faces who once never saw him. Students who ignored him, looked past him, assumed his silence was weakness. Teachers who once turned away. Parents, siblings, advocates, and strangers who had come to see something real. A boy turned voice. He felt their eyes, their quiet apologies, their awe. He reached the stage. It felt warm beneath his feet. The microphone awaited him, polished silver, a thin cord stretching behind. Cameras framed him from all angles. Reporters lined the front row. A banner behind him read, Hamilton Prep. A new era. Behind that, a projection flashed images, his chalkboard solutions, the screenshot of the split problem, the email leaks, the marchers outside the school. He stood tall. At his side, Ms. Janney, a tall, steady figure, smiled quietly. Next to her, Principal Brenner and members of the school board shuffled in their seats. Granger's podium was empty. The first chant started softly. A ripple. Khalil, Khalil, Khalil. It grew. Students in the back rows, joining. Some stood, others raised phones. The chant spread, filling the auditorium until the walls echoed it. Khalil, 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 Khalil. Closed his eyes momentarily, inhaled, then stepped forward. The echo of his name faded to silence under his presence. He opened his mouth. Thank you. His voice was firm but quiet, tested by emotion. Thank you to every student, teacher, parent and stranger, who believed not because I proved them right, but because the work demanded to be seen. He paused. The lights caught the glint in his eyes. I want you to remember something. I almost forgot. There was a time this stage didn't see me. This school pretended I didn't belong. Doors were shut. Questions were withheld. Tests were traps. But tonight it sees you too. He gestured broadly. The auditorium, once icy with exclusion, felt warm, alive, inviting. Dr. Walter Granger has resigned as department chair effective immediately. His resignation letter cited a desire to step aside for structural renewal. He is no longer part of this school's leadership. The crowd gasped, then applauded. Some tears, some cheered. Principal Brenner stood, stepped forward, voice shaky in the microphone. In light of current revelations in student activism, we announce Ms. Janney as interim department head of mathematics. Effective today. Applause. Janney nodded, composed but moved. Khalil continued. We are also launching the Khalil Harris Equity and Excellence Scholarship, open to any student who faces systemic barriers, financial, racial, academic, so that no one in this building is told they don't belong because someone decided early that they should be filtered out. The projection shifted. Logo, mission, eligibility. The chanting resumed. Phones raised higher. Cameras swirled. But before exiting, Khalil looked back, his voice lowering so everyone felt the weight. For every black kid told they didn't belong, the stage is yours now. Use it. Speak from it. Change it. Because the walls heard almost silence for too long. He lingered a second, eyes sweeping the crowd, holding their gaze. Then he turned and descended the step. As he reached the edge of the stage, the unexpected twist came. A student in the front row, taller than most, quiet, stood up holding a folder. He was a junior in his calculus class. Someone Khalil barely knew. He stepped forward onto the stage. He opened the folder, released papers. It was a sealed list. This is what they never wanted you to see, the student said. Every student they flagged, names, scores, race. You deserve more. The list fluttered to the ground. The crowd leaned in. Cameras pivoted. The architecture of exclusion lay revealed again. Khalil raised a hand to that student. Silent. The student nodded briefly, returned to his seat under thunderous applause. Khalil turned back to the microphone. The cameras caught every breath of his chest. He paused, then walked off the stage side door, flanked by Janney and Brenner, the crowd chanting behind them. Outside, beyond the doors, a sea of supporters had gathered, holding signs, Math for All, Expose the Networks, We Belong. They cheered as Khalil emerged. Reporting lights flashed, microphones pointed, reporters called questions. But Khalil held up his hand. The chant rose again. This is not over, he said to the crowd. It's just begun. The student on stage reveals a hidden roster, names, scores, flaggings, exposing deeper truths that no one anticipated. No one should have to prove their worth just to be seen. If you've ever been overlooked, silenced, or told you didn't belong, this story was for you. Type yes if you believe truth deserves a voice, and subscribe if this broke your heart.